What's that smell? Oh, never mind. It's just a Pong. Hello and welcome to this retrospective look back at one of the first video gaming machines ever to be released for the home market. I'm RetroSteve UK and this is the Binatone TV Master Mark IV. There were a number of variations released between 1976 and 1979, and I'll be detailing those shortly, but this is the version my family had back in the late 70s, and it's the one I'll be demonstrating here later on in this video. These machines mainly featured variations of Pong, the classic bat and ball game, which was designed to resemble an electronic version of tennis. Binatone was launched as a company in London in the late 1950s by two brothers from Bombay, Gulu and Partap Lalvani, who named the company after their sister, Bina. They initially imported radios to the UK from Japan and eventually moved into manufacturing their TV game machines in the 1970s. Since then, they've manufactured a range of products including cassette players, cordless phones, digital photo frames, wireless routers and sat-navs, and the company still appear to be trading today in 2024. As far as I've been able to research, there were a total of 9 Binatone TV Master consoles released, each with a selection of built-in games, and one spin-off machine called the Binatone Superstar, which had a cartridge slot that allowed for extra games to be purchased in addition to the basic bat and ball type games. The TV Master Mark IV features 4 variations of Pong: tennis, football, squash and squash practice, all displayed in glorious black and white. The TV Master 4+2 adds 2 extra games, but these target shooting games required an additional light gun that was sold separately. The rudimentary shooting games involved pointing the light gun at a single white square that bounced around the screen and accumulating points for each square shot. Not particularly exciting by today's standards, but it would have been quite a novelty back in the 1970s. The TV Master Mark VI was identical to the 4+2. But included the light gun as standard, so you didn't have to buy it separately. The TV Master Mark VIII upped its game a little with a more stylish case, upgraded analog joystick controllers, and a total of 8 built-in games. Ditching the naff light gun games, the Mark VIII offered tennis, football, ice hockey, grid ball, basketball solo, squash and squash solo, a nice mix of 1 and 2 player variations. The TV Master Mark X contained 10 built-in games. These are basically the same 8 games as the Mark VIII machine, but with the 2 light gun games added back in. The twist this time is that you shoot the targets using on-screen crosshairs controlled by the analog joysticks, so there's no need for a light gun. The other 4 consoles in the range dropped the TV Master name and were rebranded as the Binatone Color TV game. These contained the same games and features as the Mark IV, the 4+2, the Mark VI and the Mark X, but with redesigned casings, and as the name suggests, they were also able to display up to 4 different colours on the screen. The final model, the Binatone Superstar, came with a cartridge containing the same games as the Colour Mark X, but the cartridge slot allowed for additional games to be purchased. There were 4 cartridges made available at the time. Super 10 was the free cartridge that came with it. Knockout added breakable bricks to the mix, resulting in very basic versions of the classic game Breakout. Brands Hatch involved moving a racing car left and right to avoid other cars that were dropping down the screen, and Stunt Rider was a motorbike stunt game with obstacles to jump over and avoid. Johnny Beartoes on YouTube has some great footage of these games running, so I recommend popping over to his channel after watching this. The link is in the description. The machine I have here is the Binatone TV Master Mark IV. Although this is the model my family had back in 1979, I bought this particular one on eBay recently for £15 plus postage. The outer box has seen better days, but you can still see the detail, the branding, the model number, the claims of excitement for the family, assurances that it will work on your telly, and some basic depictions of what you can expect from the games. On the top side of the machine are the game selection switches and control buttons, 2 controller input sockets and a big old speaker grille in the middle, as the in-game sound effects are produced here on the console itself rather than through your TV speaker. On the right, the slider switch here lets you select which of the 4 games you want to play, from tennis, football, squash, and the only single-player game, squash practice. The top 2 switches on the left are the on-off power switch and the on-off sound switch for when those incessant beeps are getting a bit too much. The remaining 4 switches allow you to change in-game settings which affect the difficulty. The speed of the ball, the maximum angle of the ball's bounce, the size of the bats, and the serve setting changes whether the ball is served automatically after each point. If it's set to manual serve, the ball will only be served when you press the blue man serve button. The white start button begins a new game whenever it's pressed, even if a game is partway through. On the right side, there's a socket where the included mains power adapter would have plugged in. These days those are pretty much non-existent, and if there are any out there, they may not be safe to use, so I'm using a universal power adapter set to 9 volts DC, positive tip, and a 3.5mm mono jack plug. Underneath is a battery compartment, so the unit can also be powered by 6 D-cell batteries. I've no idea how long those would last, but it's likely to be a decent amount of time considering the low power consumption of the machine and the large energy ratings of D-cell batteries. This compartment is also where the TV cable emerges from, so the cable can be rolled up and stored here when not in use, and if you're careful, the game controllers can also be crammed in here as well. The controllers are simple paddle type controllers, similar to the ones used on the Atari 2600 VCS games console. You turn the dials in a circular motion, and the on-screen bats move up and down in response to your movements. Back in the 70s and 80s, standard TVs were designed to be tuned in to the RF radio frequencies that were being broadcast by TV stations. As such, games consoles used that same method, so this old machine will only work on older TV sets that have an RF aerial input, and the TV needs to be tuned in to the frequency that the machine is putting out. There is a modification that can be done to convert this machine to the newer composite SCART inputs, but it involves intricate soldering and risks damaging the machine if you don't know what you're doing. It's also worth mentioning at this point that if you have a Binatone machine with the light gun, the gun will only work on older CRT televisions. They will not function on modern flat screen TVs like the one that I'm using here. Each of the 4 games is a slight variation on the original Pong game, and as I explained previously, the buttons and switches on the machine can be used to change the difficulty. My lovely wife kindly agreed to help me with this footage, even though she's not a great video games player, so thanks to her for that. And we've flipped all the switches to the easiest settings. In harder difficulty modes, the bats can be smaller, the ball can be faster, and the angle that the ball bounces off the bats can be wider, depending on where the ball hits the bat. The aim in each game is to reach 15 points, and the game ends when one of the players hits that target. It was around 1979 at the age of 5 when my mum and stepdad came home with this mysterious bright orange Binatone box she'd picked up second-hand from a friend. I had no idea what a video or computer game even was at that point, so when it was hooked up to the telly and sprang to life on the screen, it was like magic. Our TV, which up until now had only been good for passively watching telly, all of a sudden it was displaying stuff on the screen that would move around in response to these little buttons and dials that I was pressing and turning. Honestly, I was astounded. And it was this initial exposure to on-screen gaming that got me hooked into the video game hobby that I'm still into now at the age of 50. I asked for your comments and memories of these old Binatone machines, or any other Pong and TV tennis machines for that matter, and here's what some of you had to say. Jason Marison at Blood Rain UK, like me, had this as his first console growing up in the 70s, and was amazed by the magical experience of having a box that plugged into the TV that you could make do things by twisting a knob on the controller, and it started his lifelong love of computers, games and technology. IBP 1966 reminded me of an unintentional secret feature that I'd forgotten about. If you hold the game selector between 2 games, you get a mix of the 2. I vaguely remember doing this, but I've decided against trying it on my current 43-year-old console, as I think there's a good chance it may already be on its last legs. Mr. Positronia's dad still has the Binatone Superstar machine, the one with the cartridges. He remembers playing basketball and football on it, and he loved the stunt bike game, which involved jumping over red buses and trying to land without crashing. Groundhog Life had a Binatone, but their dad wouldn't let them play for too long in case it left a burn-in on the TV screen. Now, I do remember this being a thing on CRT screens, and it was the reason screensavers were invented. Static, high-contrast images would leave permanent marks on monitor screens if they were on screen for too long. And finally, GW at GWareWiz wanted to point out that kids on modern football games have no idea where it all started, as we were scoring 15 goals playing 1-1-0 formation back in 1980. So do you remember these old Binatone Pong machines? Did you have one or something similar? And what do you think of them now in hindsight? If you have any thoughts, positive or negative, share them in the comments and we can chat about it there. And if you'd like to be included in a future retrospectives video, keep an eye on my various social media platforms where I'll be asking for your input whenever I'm working on something new. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee tip jar if you'd like to say thanks with a small gesture. All the links are in the description. Before we finish off now with some bonus footage, I'd like to thank everyone who provided comments for this video, to thank you for liking and subscribing, and of course to thank you all for watching Retrospectives.